DevOps Iterations.
And here we are, another episode of Abnormal DevOps Iterations, and this time is with Yasmin Rajabi, who I keep on receiving recommendation about. So, Yasmin, really, you are a star for whoever I talk with. So, first of all, how are you? How is going?
It's good. It's good. Thank you for the kind words. I'm happy to, chat with you. And as I mentioned before we got started, like I've definitely seen your name in a lot of places. You've been a huge impact on the Puppet community. So thank you for everything you've done.
Yeah, well, Puppet is things of your past, at least. Now you are doing, let's say, other things. Can you quickly maybe tell us what is your current activities in terms of work?
Yeah. So I'm currently the COO at StormForge, and we do Kubernetes optimization. So my life now is about still a lot of infrastructure automation, just in the Kubernetes world. And honestly, it has a lot of comparisons to my Puppet life. Puppet used to set configurations for folks, so they didn't have to worry about it. That's what StormForge does: sets configurations within Kubernetes. Specifically requests and limits, but to help optimize resources, because people usually don't know what to set it to. And we could talk about that forever, but that's where that's my life now. Just looking at how we can take software to make people's lives easier in the context of Kubernetes.
Cool. And I have to admit, before this call, I connected to your website, to StormForge, and the demo is wonderful. The demo,
That's
I mean,
awesome.
it's so straightforward. I mean, I'm not a big expert about Kubernetes, but it was so straightforward. You have the code to patch, you have the automatic apply if you install the agent. Great. I mean, if it's like this in real life, I guess so. It's really a wonderful thing.
I love that. I'll definitely pass that along to the team, because they spend a lot of focus on making sure it's dead simple to do the job we need to do, make it boring for users so they can focus on more important things.
You have the ability to do things automatically, some kind of automatic.
Yeah. Yep. So we do have an applier, essentially is what we call it. It sits in the cluster, and it will continuously deploy recommendations based on your traffic patterns. And a feature. So there's actually a lot of ex-Puppet people at StormForge as well. So we like to joke that one of the features we have is basically like Puppet. So if it detects drift, we've deployed a recommendation, someone's gone in and changed it, made a new deployment, something like that. It'll detect the drift and then deploy the recommendation again and kind of set it back.
So the offering is a SaaS. So you have
Yes.
online. I'm not scared of being able to apply changes in the Kubernetes clusters of customers automatically.
So I'd say some people are scared in the beginning, but it's a journey, just like all automation is. So we're SaaS, but we're not actually like poking into the customer's cluster and deploying the recommendations. The applier sits in the customer's cluster locally, and they get to configure when it gets deployed, how it gets deployed. We give them a lot of guardrails so they can set, like, obviously schedule, do you want to deploy it every day? Do you want to deploy it once a week? But then they can kind of think about it in different ways, like only deploy a recommendation if it's at least X amount larger than the last one. Or if I have a really large recommendation, don't deploy it all at once, do that slowly over time. And there's been a lot of, I guess, thought put into how someone takes a piece of code to be able to automate it in a safe way so they get that confidence. Because to your point, like a lot of banks are our customers, right? I can't go to a bank and say, we're going to automate all of your Kubernetes requests and limits, and we're going to do it with the SaaS software. Like, whoa, how are you going to do that? What data are you collecting? We have so many security. We're SOC 2 certified, but we've gone through so many security hoops for these customers. We collect like less than 20 metrics, and it's all usage, it's like CPU usage, memory usage, nothing. It's just metrics. So usually that helps. But the biggest piece to get people to kind of get over that fear is just how they take a crawl, walk, run approach to automation. So you mentioned you saw like the patches in the UI. Look at the patch, download it, apply it on your own. You don't have to use the software. Do it where you feel comfortable. Once you build that confidence, then maybe you're comfortable pushing the button in the UI, and that will deploy the change. And then as you kind of gain that comfort, you feel confident in the tool. You feel like you're willing to put your credibility on the line too. Because say you're a platform engineer, you start deploying these, then the developer goes, wait, you changed my application, you set my configurations. Like we know it takes a lot of time to build trust. It takes 2 seconds to lose it. So we've tried to build that journey. So one, the engineer themselves feels confident in rolling this out because it's them on the hook if something goes wrong. And two, that the software itself has a lot of like fail safe so that you can get to that fully automatic mode in a way that makes sense for each customer's journey. Every customer is going to go at different speeds, and we want to meet them where they are.
All right. I guess that's definitely the sage way to do things. So in the Kubernetes space, I mean, you work on Kubernetes only. The product is I guess you already discussed the possibility to do the things in cloud providers, and maybe you already saw there are a solution. I don't know why you are not yet in cloud. I mean, you're not offering the same thing.
Yeah, it's a great question. We do get asked it of like, oh, okay, you're very focused on Kubernetes. Can you help me on like just my traditional VMs? Can you help me right size my EC2 instances, for example? I'd say we're small, we're a startup, and we want to be really good at the thing we do. We don't want to do a bunch of things like 50% quality. You know, we want to do it and be the best in the specific solution. And then we partner with other tools. So for example, on the instance side, we love Carpenter. And Carpenter is a great tool at right sizing your nodes. Still, obviously, like in the Kubernetes space, but we've kind of taken more of a partnership approach to this. Like we have a partnership with a company called CloudBolt, and they do like more traditional VM cost FinOps reporting. They'll give you optimizations as well. They give you the automation to actually deploy those. So we've taken the partnership approach to that. We do get asked like, why don't you do VMs too? And it's just about like making sure whatever we do is at top quality, and so we can focus on Kubernetes, and that's where everyone's moving to. So I'd say there's enough opportunity for us in the Kubernetes world before we start to branch out.
All right. So for what you can talk about under the hoods, how the full recommendation engine, if you can call it, works. Did you develop your own models?
Yeah, great question. So we have some super smart PhDs who have been with the company since day one. The company itself has been around for like 7-8 years now, and they started out as a machine learning company. Nothing to do with Kubernetes. They were building like holograms. So a bunch of super smart machine learning engineers looking for a problem to solve. And the first few years, they did a lot of power optimization. So think like large facilities, data centers. Foxconn was actually one of their first customers. And they built some algorithms that helped optimize the power to those facilities. And it was painful because, you know, getting data out of these systems is not as easy as just like pulling data from an API. And their own software, the machine learning there actually ran on Kubernetes. This is like in the early days, maybe 5 years ago. And one of the engineers was like, well, the CEO was like, why are we spending so much on our cloud bill? And so one of the engineers went to kind of take a look. And he's like, first of all, I never, ever want to do this again. This sucks. It's very manual. Second, all of the data is very standard. It's a perfect problem for machine learning. And at the time, I'd say Kubernetes was still immature in the larger organizations. And you didn't have a bunch of like performance testing practices. You didn't have a lot of instrumentation in production. It was still pretty new. So as a company, like we've been on that journey with folks where now you talk to people about Kubernetes optimization. They're like, yep, totally get it. My developers set their requests super high. I have to deal with the cloud bill. I don't know how to change it because I don't want to impact their application. I've tried. It's manual. It's tedious. It's painful. That conversation is a lot easier than a few years ago when they're like, I don't know, like, I don't know what my requests are set to. Maybe I have waste, maybe I don't have waste. And so that's where the company actually started, from that moment of, hey, wait a minute, this is a really big problem. It's painful, and there will be a market for this. So when you ask of like, how does it work under the hood? The algorithms are built by the engineers at StormForge. It's actually patent pending, which is pretty cool. And the way that it works is typically, I think, you have a model and then you train the model with a bunch of different things. But for us, every workload is actually treated as a snowflake. So every workload gets its own model. And we don't the reason for that is then the user doesn't have to say, hey, here are all of my Java applications, here are my Postgres databases, here's this, here's that. The machine learning will actually look at all the data and come up with the right recommendation for that specific workload. And you might have, let's say, 100 Java workloads, and they may get similar recommendations, but it'll treat it as unique so that it's the best request for those set of pods. And we have a few different algorithms that we've built in-house. One of them is just the traditional vertical auto scaling, allows us to be intelligent, and essentially has the machine learning build the histogram and what the recommendations should be in the ranges, and where the user can interact is they can tell the machine learning, I want it to be more aggressive, I want it to be less aggressive. So they have those kind of knobs, but everything else is the ML. We have another algorithm that focuses on the horizontal behavior. So in Kubernetes, there's a tool called the HPA, Horizontal Pod Autoscaler. There's an open source tool called the VPA, Vertical Pod Autoscaler. But they're often at odds with each other because the HPA looks at, okay, I'm going to scale you and I'm going to add replicas based on how much CPU you're using. And then the VPA is like, well, you don't need all this CPU. I'm going to take it away. Then the HPA is like, well, you're using more CPU, so I'm going to give you another replica. And it causes to thrash. And so the way we get around that is we have a machine learning algorithm that looks at that scaling behavior and make sure when we set the request, we also set the target utilization to kind of avoid any thrashing, continue to be reliable, and allow you to gain efficiencies on the workload. And I'd say the last algorithm that we have, and the ML guys are going to be like, well, they're all technically called algorithms. This is how I think of them. We have machine learning to solve these three problems. The last one is around seasonality. So the machine learning can look at the data and over time spot trends. Like 9 a.m., you need more resources, but around 5 p.m., you actually need less resources because maybe you're a trading app. We have some trading customers. Maybe you're a trading app and your resources are more intensive during the day. So the machine learning will, again, look at all the workloads and be able to see what those patterns are and suggest the recommendations for the right times so that you can get more efficiencies either overnight, on the weekends, that sort of thing. So that's all when it comes to ML, those are the brains. But the power comes in the automation. So machine learning's running. It comes up with recommendations on whatever schedule the customers have set. And the way we actually scale it out is super impressive. And again, so kudos to the engineering team, that a bunch of really smart people. The way it scales out has allowed us to onboard customers with hundreds of thousands of workloads within minutes, because it scales up. We use our own software internally so that we're continuously right sizing so that we can scale as needed, not run out of resources, and also not pay too much because we're a startup. We got to be careful of costs. So that is all the brains, and then the action is what sits in the customer's cluster. So that applier will then take the recommendation from our API and then deploy it. And that's where the customer using configurations can give all of those inputs into the machine learning. So they can say when to run a recommendation. They can say how aggressive they want. They can set policies for, some people are very religious about setting limits in Kubernetes. When it comes to CPU, you'll see a lot of people, and we believe that too, but don't set limits for CPU. Memory side's a little different, but there's so many religious debates here. We want to make sure all those policies can be pulled into our software, and going back to that confidence building, if the user feels like they can take the policies that make sense in their organization and feed that and constrain the machine learning, then as a human, they feel better about it. So the automation that happens in the cluster, they're more okay with. And then just building the mechanisms for auto rollback. If something, for example, we see that pods are not starting up after the recommendation gets deployed, then roll it back. Or we have this find and fix response feature that will detect kills in your environment and automatically go and deploy more resources to it. You don't have to wait for your next recommendation window, and then the machine learning will take that data and use it to feed the recommendation. So it's kind of cool. I feel like I just ran through that quickly, but it's what we've seen is the power and intelligence we give people is finding the right values for each workload using the machine learning. But really what makes their life easier is the automation part, because we can give them the best recommendations. If they can't effectively deploy it and continuously deploy it, because you could deploy the recommendations once, wait a month. Now your workloads are growing, they're getting more efficient. Like you have to do it continuously. That is what essentially will, that's the piece that allows them to kind of achieve what the machine learning is giving them.
Two questions for the moment. First one is out of the data, the results which came out from your models is somehow filtered for some kind of validation within some ranges, some way that you avoid, I wouldn't say hallucinations, because I guess your models are more data-oriented than many of the current models. But I mean, I guess you have some kind of filters. I don't know if I can say is that.
Yeah,
okay, so
for sure. So what we do is an AI, so it can't technically hallucinate. And because it's more machine learning, we give it those guardrails so that from the data we've seen, we can give it those guardrails. And then the user can also give those guardrails. So we have people that are like, yeah, you're going to give me machine learning, but I never want something than less than like 20 millicore for CPU. They can set that and have that as a safety mechanism. And honestly, in that like trust building early on, some people will set them really aggressive so they can constrain the machine learning. And we'll point out like, hey, you could save more if you let the machine learning do a little bit more. And as they build that confidence, they're like, okay, I'll reduce the constraints. I'll reduce the constraints until they just let it go.
Cool. And the other question is a curiosity. Averagely, I mean, what is the amount of savings that your customers do in terms of percentages? What do you have, I guess, some data about this?
Yeah, from a configuration settings, what are all the things customers do?
Yeah, I mean, once the customer starts to use the product, in average, what is if they apply the suggestions as they should, what are the benefits what are the medium?
Yeah. So from a benefit standpoint, generally, people save on average from like 50 to 80% in resources. And I could say like, oh, it's because our machine learning is like so great and it's going to get all of every little drop of waste.
50 to 80,
yeah.
50 to 80.
Which to 80. Yeah, it's a lot. But honestly, a lot of it is because just most environments are over provisioned to start with. There's just a ton of waste out there. And the reason for the waste is you have developers that they're not in charge of how much things cost. So they're always going to set a big buffer. It's just natural. Why would I want to get pinged overnight because my workload ran out of resources? Like, I don't want to. I'm going to give it more resources to start. And then the platform engineer is like, well, I don't understand the application. I don't necessarily want to change something. And yeah, they could look at a Grafana dashboard, look at the trends, and come up with like a high watermark, but it's still guessing. And unless you're continuously deploying that recommendation then becomes stale that you're deploying. So that like a lot of that is why there's so much waste. I think what I would argue is like our software will find more waste than other tools out there. But even just if you're not doing anything, there's generally, I think it was the CNCF found that 70% of over provisioning is due to workloads being over provisioned, like 70% of the waste. And then Datadog, I'm trying to do this by memory, so I might butcher this, but Datadog found they do a lot of like surveys on Kubernetes usage. And what they found was less than half of all containers were using, I think they had like 10 or 20% of what they're actually using. And they have a distribution. It's like a lot easier in the chart. I have a chart for this, but there's a distribution where it's only like 10% of workloads actually have this right because they're either super wasted or they're under provisioned and they're out of resources. And so getting it right, being in that sweet spot is really difficult for folks. And you never want to be in the under provision because that impacts your business. And it's safer to be in the over provision, but because it's just you're spending extra money. So there's a lot of waste out there. Like we've even had people come to us and be like, look, I know I might like in production, I have 70, 80% waste. I know it's there. I've like run the reports. I see it, but I'm not ready to just cut it all out. Like I'm not ready to let the automation go and reduce all the resources. I don't know what's going to happen. And so part of like those stories is why we've had to build into the automation kind of a slow way to roll this out. Don't cut out the 70%. Maybe you're comfortable with 20% waste. Cool. So we'll just cut down 10% at a time until we get to the point that the customer is comfortable with. So you're reducing a lot of waste still, but you're not like cutting too deep where you're not comfortable.
So another curiosity from a person who is not so expert in Kubernetes, but I guess you start to, let's say, save money when you have less hosts running in your. So in some way, you actually start to really take advantage of the benefits of your optimizations, where you are able to shrink the number of hosts of the clusters. And
Exactly.
how frequently people do happily create and destroy hosts in the clusters? Maybe, okay, in the cloud is different, but on-premise maybe. I don't know how this is happening. Is a problem only in my mind that one
No,
thing is
very.
optimizing the CPU of a pod, and one thing is getting rid of an host?
It's a very good question. And some folks start with like reducing their nodes, but because there's so much waste in the pods, then there's only so much they can reduce. And so I mentioned Carpenter earlier, best tool for this. It's open source. It's AWS does have a like paid support via auto mode. So if you don't want to run it, you can have somebody else run it, which is awesome. But it is open source, and it does exactly the problem you just stated, where it'll look at all your nodes, look at the pods within the nodes, and it'll right size the node so you can consolidate down and essentially save money. And where we work well with Carpenter is because we're consolidating the pods and reducing the waste there, then Carpenter can come in and cut down on your nodes. And when you're in public cloud, that's great because that's money you're actually paying. And even if you're not using Carpenter, then with our software, when we reduce the pods, we'll also recommend the node shape you should run the workloads on. So we'll look at the shape of the workloads and say, hey, you're running these workloads on a compute optimized, but honestly, based on the shape, you would reduce waste if you're running them on a memory optimized. So helping give them those suggestions. And then they'll have cluster autoscaler if they don't have Carpenter, and they can consolidate on the nodes. And on the on-prem side, if you're not in public cloud, it's less of a like I'm saving actual dollars. It's more about capacity. So we have a customer that's mostly on-prem, and they have developers continuing to deploy more workloads and continuing to add more resources. And they're like, well, look at how much waste you have. If you could reduce the waste, you could use those resources for your new workloads. And so by running StormForge, they're continuously freeing up capacity. And they actually, a funny, not funny story is they had us deployed on all their clusters, but 2. And they had an outage on 2 clusters because they ran out of resources as the devs were deploying more workloads. And they're like, well, what's different about these 2 compared to the rest? And the rest of them had StormForge just not even like every day, just once a week, right sizing the workloads and freeing up waste. And so they could continue to move at the speed of the business. But those 2 clusters, I honestly don't remember why they weren't deployed yet. But they ran out of capacity because they didn't have that. So it's a little different on the on-prem side, but it's still about how do you make sure that you are running as efficient as you can be.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's shift. I mean, optimization of Kubernetes, I guess you know everything about that. But more generally in Kubernetes world, how do you see where Kubernetes is going? What are the possible evolutions of the tool and the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I feel like, at least for me, I've been in this Kubernetes journey 3 years now, ever since I joined StormForge. And when I first joined, people, especially at like the larger organizations, it was still an expert tool. Like you needed someone that really knew Kubernetes in and out to be able to lead your organization in deploying all your workloads on Kubernetes. Or people were doing the migration, they were still early on it. But now, and just over the years, the more people I talk to, it's less of like, okay, should I be moving to Kubernetes? What are the benefits? It's I'm here now. I've scaled it. I need to deal with the day 2 challenges that most people didn't really think about. It's also very similar with like the Puppet world of like those day 2 challenges until it starts to hurt people. They don't always think about it. And so where I see kind of Kubernetes going is more for the user that's not the expert. So there's like more tools out there around abstraction, how to make things simpler. Where what I've seen kind of the shift towards is now you have people that were doing maybe traditional DevOps and now have moved over because once the migration happens, now more of the workloads, more of the applications are on the Kubernetes platform. So a lot of folks have had to kind of upscale and learn new technologies, which one is great for them, obviously, but 2 has kind of made it so it's not the tool for the experts, for the 1-2 folks in the organization. It's a tool for the many because that's what's running the business now. And so even just in some of the other tools in the ecosystem that we've seen, it's all about how can you make this simpler for folks. You still need all of the knobs and like all the different configuration settings under the hood, but how do you make it simpler for folks? So that's where I kind of see things going more, because now it's the tool for the enterprise. Like at almost every large organization I talk to is either deployed on Kubernetes, like for the majority, or they have plans to over the next few years.
Right. Another shift in terms of topics. Your day-by-day activities. What do you do in your work?
Oh, wow.
How do you spend your working time?
It's a great question, because sometimes I ask myself that. I'm like, what do I do here? And I don't really always know the answer. For me, it's a little bit of everything, just as the nature of my role. And we're a startup, so people have to wear a bunch of hats. So when I joined StormForge, I led the product team. And I still get involved with the product, but now we have a product leader who's awesome. So my balance is a little bit of like, I still want to get in the weeds, but I need to make sure I don't make his life miserable. So I'd say part of my day is just driving him crazy. I'm like, what are we working on? I want to give some input on stuff, but I haven't been involved. So just, it's a tightrope of wanting to still be involved, but not wanting to get in the way. And then I also work closely with our director of marketing on, okay, how do we get our name out there? How do we make sure people understand the value of what StormForge has to offer and show up in the places where engineers are? Because if you're a platform engineer, you don't want to talk to a sales rep. You don't want really marketing material. You just want software. You want to get your hands on the software and try it out. So we give our software as a free trial so everyone can install it, do whatever they want on their own, and then they can come to us when they feel like they want to move forward. And so from a marketing standpoint, that means how do we show up where people are looking, and how do we show up in a way that's not, hey, like, here's all the like marketing benefits you can get. It's no, here's the software. You try it yourself. If you have this challenge, we believe that if you use the tool, you'll feel good about it. So like showing up in places like Reddit or just Slack communities where people have challenges, and just making sure that we're being authentic when we show up. Part of it is just general, like talking to customers, whether it's from a sales perspective or a feedback perspective, or we have an escalation, we need to jump on and just make sure we're doing the right thing
That's the bad
by
part
the
of the
user.
work, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's talking to folks like you, or going to events. I love going to events because we get to actually talk to our users face to face. I love being remote. I can't really imagine another world, but I miss the getting to be with like the people that actually use the software and seeing them day to day. I remember back at Puppet, I used to get to visit people in their offices and see like, okay, a day in the life, what are you thinking? Puppet was not something they were thinking every day. It was like an hour of their day they had to do something so they can move on to their many tasks that they had. It's very similar now. It's just I don't get to see that environment or like talk to them face to face. Like, what are the things that are top of mind for you as a user every day? And how can we make sure that the things that you care about are like the things you can continue to care about? So that part I like a lot of the role of just getting, whether it's an event or something like that, getting in front of people. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think, what else do I do? I go to a lot of meetings. Have a lot of that.
And also, and yeah, will you be at KubeCon London? This
Yeah. Yeah, we will.
Okay.
Are you going to be there?
Yeah, I
Oh,
will.
awesome. It would be great to meet in person.
Okay, cool. Yeah, indeed. Do you have a stand there
Yeah.
present?
We'll
Okay.
have a booth. We usually do like some giveaways, like Lego giveaways. Yeah, KubeCon's our favorite event because it's all practitioners. And so you get to like actually talk to people about the challenges, see all the new tools, the new innovation coming out. So yeah, and I get to go to London, so that's cool.
Yeah, that will be definitely cool. Any tool in the Kubernetes world which makes you quite excited about something really cool?
Yeah, so Crow, Kubernetes Resource Orchestrator, came out recently, I think like a couple months ago, but it's been more, I guess, being adopted. And so that's been pretty cool. Not from our types of resources, but just, again, trying to abstract some of the complexities for users. I know Carpenter's been out for a while, but with auto mode launching also a couple months ago at reInvent, it moves away a little bit from open source because obviously it's a paid product from AWS. But what I like is when we talk to users that are running Carpenter, they're like, I love it. It's great, but I just don't want to deal with the like management overhead. And us being a SaaS company, we're like, totally agree. We should run the software so you can just get the benefits. And now people have that solution where they can have AWS run the software and they just get the benefits. So that's pretty cool. But I'm excited to see, you know, what's going to launch at KubeCon EU and what new things. We're also keeping an eye on in-place pod right sizing. That's something that a lot of our users ask us about. So when Kubernetes, if you adjust the requests on the pod, it then needs to restart in order for that to take into effect. And, you know, some people, their workloads are not, I'd say, best architected to handle restarts, even though they should. And so that's something that the community's been kind of working on for a bit now. I think it's still in beta, but to allow updates without having to restart the pod. It's not going to work in like every scenario, but we are excited to just see the progress there as well.
Yeah, because it fits well your use case, no? The need of refining. Nice. So let's take a step into the past. You were in Puppet. You were very appreciated in Puppet world, and as I told you, a lot of people I talked with told me you should talk with Yasmin. And
Thank you.
here we are. Do you think Puppet has a present and a future in the IT world? I know it's a bad question.
I know. No, it's a good one. I mean, Puppet always and will always have a special place in my heart. It's the company that kind of pushed me into the product side because I was in engineering before, and Puppet was that perfect transition to product, which, you know, I've liked a lot. And the thing I loved about Puppet is that we use software to bring people closer together to, you know, get rid of the toil and use automation to make their lives better. And like, that's the core concept that I feel like will be in the present. And you see that I would argue you see that in our tool, but you see that in other tools of that's the concept that will go in towards the future. So we're like adjacent to the FinOps space, and some of the partners we work with in FinOps always love to compare it to like Puppet, you know, in the DevOps world, you use the software to bring people together from two sides. And now in the FinOps world, you're going to use software to bring people together from two sides. In the security world, you're using software to bring people together from two sides. So I think the goal of Puppet will continue in the present. The software itself, I mean, I think it's made for traditional VMs. And do I think traditional VMs will go away forever at some point? Probably not. Like, we're always going to have some VMs in different environments. But I don't necessarily see it being the majority.
Yeah. We still have mainframes, I guess. We still have physical virtual machines around for some years. I mean, I was thinking about another question about Puppet, but I forgot it. So let me recover a bit. Well, let's switch from the past to the future then.
Sure.
You are close with your product to have this concept of AI-driven, AI-managed infrastructures in some way. No, you are starting to have a model which automatically, or if you allow it to do that, automatically changes some settings in your infrastructure. And of course, everybody is in this world is starting to talk about AI ops in some way, whatever you mean by that. Where do you think we are going? What could be the possible future scenarios in the short, mid, and maybe long term?
Yeah. I mean, I think right now it's more about like a little bit more curiosity and can it meet business goals. So we use AI tools internally for different things. Like, I mean, I use it for research, obviously, but even for like, can we point it to docs and ask questions and have it come up with answers based on information we've given it? What I like to make sure is very clear is like we do machine learning. We don't have like an LLM that is more like the chat GPTs of the world.
Yeah,
And
do
so
everything within the
exactly.
yeah.
And what I have seen is people want to use that technology to be able to answer questions of their infrastructure. So like how many workloads do I have that are running X? You could go look, dig, and find that information, or you could use AI to be able to look at everything quickly and give you those answers. So that's what I've seen more from like right now. I think in the medium term, people are definitely shifting towards, okay, how can I take basic tasks and use like an AI agent for them? We will see that more and more. But there still needs to be the human in the loop to kind of trust the process. Like I personally don't trust most things that come out of, even like if I ask ChatGPT a question, I still have to take that answer and go verify it. I don't trust it yet. It's hallucinated enough where I'm like, well, that's my credibility on the line. So I'm going to make sure it's right before I use it. And as long as we're still in that space, then I think humans are still going to want to vet it, but use it to all of the like cruft, the toil. Why not? Like, why not use AI to solve that problem for you? Will we be in a world where like everything is AI and there's no more humans? I would like to believe we won't. Who really knows? Maybe they'll take over. I was reading something that like some AI has been able to like replicate itself. So it's, scary when regulations come in. What are you feeding it? Where does it get the data? What are like copyright infringements? So there's a lot of interesting questions of how are we going to answer those. But I do think, especially like for the enterprise, that human still needs to be in the loop to vet it, to do a little bit of like the thinking, the gut check, because it's going to be the human's credibility if they deploy it. But I do think like we'll see more use, and even just in questions I get from users of like, oh, like, do you have something where I can? It's that asking questions like, how can I get insights on our in my infrastructure, things that are anomalies, for example. We were talking to someone recently, and they're like, oh, I didn't know I had all these under provision workloads. I didn't know my requests were set so far away from the usage. And they're like, do you have a way to present these anomalies to me? And for me, I was like, interesting that you call them anomalies, because for us, that's just what the software does. That's like a piece of the value prop. But for them, that's something different they're not thinking about until software brings that to light. So in this case, like machine learning brings that to light. So I think we'll see more of that. Something that we're toying with is like, how can we use more, and this is a little bit farther in the future, but like more LLM AIs to ask questions about your infrastructure and get those answers. So for example, where are all my memory leaks? We see that, we could present it back to the user. Or what workloads have the most resource usage on like Fridays. So asking those types of questions and getting those answers quickly without having to dig in the data, I think that's a great use for AI.
Yeah, I do agree on the human in the loop, but I feel like we will get, as we get used to automation in computers and we let more and more over the years, basically all our societies in the hands of computers now. I feel like, I guess that sooner or later, more we trust the tool, more we will allow the tool to do things by itself. And
yeah, I mean, I was in Arizona a little bit ago, and I never thought I would ever get into a self-driving car, but I did, and it was quite the experience because you're in the car, there's no driver, and sometimes it switches lanes and then switches back, and you're like, "What are you doing?" But in real time, you can see like, okay, what it sees, the cars, the people. It's really fascinating, and like as a person, I never ever thought like. I don't even like a lot of computers in my cars. I would love to go back to like 1960s car. I never thought I would ever get into a self-driving car, but I did, and it was okay. I'm not ready to do it again anytime soon. But I think over time, people will kind of warm up to the idea more, and then we will see less human in the loop.
Yeah. And maybe one day we will be forbidden from driving cars because it's too dangerous to let humans drive cars.
Yeah.
I
mean, I'm in Boston, so our roads are not friendly for self-driving cars. Like in Phoenix, they're straight, they're wide, there's a lot of space, but like I can't imagine the chaos in Boston being like those tiny roads that barely fit a car, and then the drivers that are a little wild. But to your point, yeah, maybe that those drivers won't be allowed to drive anymore.
We will see, I guess. Yeah. Also, another thing about the AI taking over. No, there is this common nightmare which we keep on representing in movies and everything. So probably we are feeding the AIs to think about this possibility. And sometimes I think that it's mostly a projection of what we will do as humans. No, think about what aliens. Aliens are always people, beings from the external coming in to Earth and trying to use it. And then when we talk about Earth too, human livable planets where we could go and colonize without thinking about who is living there.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe the same thing can happen with AI. No, we think about what the AI could do to take over because that's what we usually do as human race.
Yeah, we're like manifesting it to happen.
Yeah, somehow suggesting the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. So I always do some kind of common questions in this podcast. One of them is how will be your computer in 20, 30 years from now? What kind of a computer device you will be using?
20, 30 years? Well, I kind of hope I'm not using a computer.
Oh, come on. There will be some kind of thing around.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm someone who my work desk, like I don't have any monitors. I just have my laptop. What I love is that keeps me mobile. I never feel like I'm like tethered to the desk. If I want to work on my chair, I can work on my chair, my desk, a different room. So I think for me, it would probably be something more mobile than this. I still haven't made the move to like iPad. I have a Mac, so I haven't made the move to iPad because I need the keyboard. I have to like do real work. And iPads they're not fully there. I kind of wish I had a touchscreen sometimes. So my husband has a Microsoft computer and he has a touchscreen and like he uses 3 monitors. So we work very differently, but he has a touchscreen, which is nice. And like, I would like that. But honestly, I just really don't know if I want to use a computer 20, 30 years from now. Hoping like maybe I'll be retired. Don't need to use a computer, can maybe reduce my reliance on technology a little bit.
So you are of the family of computer users who like to retire in some kind of a garden, wild place, gardening and doing cultivations with the hands, like me.
Yeah, well, the sad thing is I don't have hobbies, so I need to find some hobbies that I'm going to do when I'm not on the computer. So it's like what I think in my head versus reality. I'll probably still be on a computer, but.
Yeah, I guess so. The same here. I mean, I think I always how to escape from computers, but I still keep on using them. So there must be a glitch in the thing. Is there a person or one more than a person, which you think I should invite to this podcast? I did the same question to Nigel. It told me Yasmin.
So I can't say Nigel, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, honestly, would you be interested in talking to our CTO?
Yeah.
Of like his journey of going from holograms to facilities to then Kubernetes. Like it's always fascinating to me, being someone that worked in. So the first few years of the startup are like very interesting because they tried so many different things. I think they had like a social network. They had the holograms I mentioned. They just like took the technology and tried to apply it to different problems. So that could be interesting. I'm trying to think. You put me on the spot. I'm not really good on my feet to think of someone. Yeah, I think you'd be good to talk to if you're interested.
Yeah, well, definitely it could be interesting. Do you plan some new pivots in your startup, or that's the direction?
No, I hope not. I mean, he may have pivots in the future. Once we were like over drinks, he was talking about all the different use cases that you could take machine learning and apply it to like traditional things. So not any of the like cool fun, like farming, like garbage, like traditional just industries that haven't been disrupted in a long time. So I always find those conversations with him interesting. I'm someone that I don't like. I know AI is going to be a big part of our lives in other areas. But like I mentioned, I'd love to have a car with no computers in it. I don't have any Alexa devices in my house, anything like that. I'm not like tin hat, like don't want this. I just, I'd rather not rely on technology as much as I do already because I feel like I'm pretty reliant on my phone. But it's always interesting talking to someone on the other side that like is building the technology and thinking through how you can take the technology and apply it to different use cases.
Right. Last question, I promise. Is there anything I haven't asked you which you would like to talk about? Something interesting for you?
I mean, I think we touched on everything. The piece I wanted to talk about when you reached out was really just the people side of, how did the software bring people together? But I think we kind of touched on that when we talked about automation and trust. I think at the end of the day, no matter if it's Kubernetes, if it's VMs, whatever it is, the goal of software should be making people's lives easier, not more complicated. Because I talked to a customer at Puppet once who was like, oh, we sent it to our TAM. It was like a big success. But he said I could go home and have dinner with my family because Puppet got me out of this like P1 incident. And that really stuck with me because we can build all these cool features. We can do whatever we want. The most important thing is like that person could go home and eat with their family. And now that I have a 10-month-old, I like have a new perspective on life. And so just continuing that in everything we do, everything in like folks that, you talk to, it all comes down of how can we make the people using the software that make their lives better.
Cool. I guess that's all, Yasmin. It has been a pleasure for me and an honor to talk with you, and see you in London at this point.
Yeah, I can't wait. That's awesome. I actually texted Nigel because I was like, I will be in your city. So I hope to meet up with him as well.
Wonderful. Bye.
Awesome. Great to chat.
Abnormal DevOps Iterations.